What's up, everybody? Welcome into yet another edition of the Baseline Jumper podcast. My name is Jason Goldstein, and on the line with me right now is the other half of our great talk team, much like the Denver Nuggets. Ben McDonald, how you doing there, Chatty Cathy?
Yeah, call me Mike Malone, Jason, because I talk a good game, and in this world, the podcasting game, that's all you got to do. So I'm proud of us. We're a good talk team, and that's all we got to be right now.
I think we should be the great talk team, and the Nuggets just need to learn to walk the walk, because I don't like how Malone's kind of copying off of us a little bit, because we were a great talk team long before the Nuggets.
Well, I don't know if I told you this, but when I was in DC a few weekends ago, I did a taco walk. And let me tell you, when you taco walk, you got to walk the walk of the taco walk. And so I think we're a good talk team and a good walk team, Jason.
Wow, I honestly think my dad jokes are rubbing off on you, and like 50,000 people all over the country just shut their podcasts off. So let us begin talking some hoops, Mr. Taco Waco Fall. Segued into Celtics, but we're going to start on a bit of a negative note, because the news broke earlier Tuesday that John Collins, the third NBA player to be suspended for an anti-drug suspension, a 25-gamer. Another statement came out about how I didn't know what I put in my body, and I'm regrettably sorry for everything. This sucks on so many levels. I was stuck between saying sucks and stinks, but this just sucks on so many levels for Collins, who's a promising young player, for the Hawks, who I picked as a playoff team in the East, and Trae Young's already gone down and come back with an ankle injury. But, what's going on with PEDs? First Wilson Chandler, then DeAndre Ayton, and now Collins? Are these guys really that dumb that they don't know what they're putting into their bodies?
Well, I want to first shout out a great article by Dan Devine on The Ringer, who kind of talked about this, and it's really interesting because we had Wilson Chandler start of the season, then we see DeAndre Ayton and now John Collins, and these are the highest profile athletes, with all due respect to Rashard Lewis, who have ever been caught. And ultimately, it does make you wonder if the league is trying to kind of crack down on this a little bit, because if you've heard some of the old interviews, there's some great interviews out there. Search it on YouTube of some of those old Nuggets and Golden State Warrior teams with Don Nelson, who now actually grows his own marijuana. But at any rate, they talked about some of the players on the team that after they got their last drug test for the year, Nelly would basically smoke them up after the games because he knew that they couldn't get tested anymore after they got their last test. So it's been a running joke for a while, and I think, Jason, that this might signal a little bit of a change in the way that the league is treating this.
Yeah, there's a difference between marijuana, which is borderline legal now, and performance-enhancing drugs that you take with a supplement or you inject it. These guys, either the NBA is cracking down or these guys are knowingly taking PEDs that are going to, ruin their seasons. Wilson Chandler might not have a roster spot in Brooklyn, where he signed earlier this offseason. Ayton, some people are calling him a bust, and it's only his second year. And then Collins, who's probably the best player of the three, is now the third person to get canned. So I think it's two completely different arguments when you talk about weed versus performance-enhancing drugs. These are PEDs, man. That's something that, I think a lot of NBA players take supplements, in their nutrition routines or things of that nature, but they have to have these trainers and people looking out for them and what they're putting into their bodies, because either they're doing this on purpose or people are really just that dumb. That's really all this boils down to.
The other side of this coin is just that Atlanta looked a little bit frisky, and I think this is enough to sink their season. I really do. I think that they were going to be a fringe playoff team, and losing 25 games of John Collins is going to be just too much for them. And I think that is a big loss for them. And I think for the Hawks, they just really don't have another upper echelon offensive player outside of Trae Young. With all due respect to guys like Jabari Parker, I don't think that they can really fill that gap. Where the Suns had a little bit more behind them when Ayton went out. So I think this is going to be a really big loss for the Hawks.
That's going to be huge. I might have to retract my statement about the Hawks being a playoff team. last week we talked about Young going down like right before we started recording, and now this week with the Collins news, it's got to be tough. I mean, it's got to be tough on Lloyd Pierce. I think all 30 NBA teams were given a memo by the league that if your player gets caught with a PED, release this statement. I put something in my body and I didn't know what it was. And you know what? Now it might be drowning Atlanta's season. And that's messed up. But on to more positive things like fights. So I kind of wanted to bring back the heat check. We haven't done it since the offseason. But we have a co-heat check here. I know this is old news, Ben, but I wanted to get your take on the Sixers-Timberwolves brawl between two of the best centers in the league, Cat, Karl Anthony Towns, and Joel Embiid, both receiving 2-game suspensions. Embiid served his, and I believe Towns is serving his final one, I think, last night. So what do you make of that fight? I mean, the main camera angle, if you were watching the game, didn't exactly get it, but there was one baseline camera that was positioned right in front of where it started, and it looked nasty. I mean, I'm surprised the suspensions were only 2 games.
I mean, I have to say, I want to start by saying I am never in favor of fights. I do not like them. I'm one of those people who watches hockey and is kind of disgusted sometimes at the fact that people are just dropping gloves and fighting on the ice. I don't think it's a part of the sport. That said, in this case, I'm completely unoriginal because unfortunately Jay Williams already kind of had this take, but I really do think that was actually really good for these two teams. And the reason is that the Sixers, this is like their identity now. They are this bully team that plays great defense, really physical, and they're just, that's kind of the way they're going to play. And I actually think that that's great for them as a team to have that. And meanwhile, on the other side, I think the biggest knock on Cat, and you saw it even in the aftermath with what Embiid kind of posted on Instagram, is that he's soft, that he's not tough. And I thought that this was actually sort of a good moment for him to not back down, to kind of show his mettle a little bit. And I don't usually feel that way, but I think with Cat, he needs to be that kind of guy for this team. This team needs him to be an MFer for them. They need that guy. They don't have it. Andrew Wiggins is not that guy, and he needs to be that guy for them. And I thought this was a little bit of a sign that maybe he has that in him, Jason. And I think if you're a Timberwolves fan, as counterintuitive as this sounds, you have to be almost a little bit encouraged that he did this, I think.
Yeah, definitely. You know, he started off the year, on fire from deep and kind of was showing his outside game a bit more. But the fact that he was able to get into the trenches with a guy like Joel Embiid, who is not known to take any crap from any opposing players, I think it was good for the sport. However, like I said earlier, I am shocked that these suspensions weren't 4 or 5 games. I mean, punches were thrown. You saw the players kind of going back on the other end of the floor in transition, only to come back when they saw the brawl taking place between these two guys. I mean, it was nasty. And the Timberwolves are one of the more surprising teams in the NBA to start the year off, and this may have set them back a bit, whereas the Sixers were the last undefeated team in the NBA in the early going of this season before they lost to the Suns last night. Now every team has a loss, but let's segue into the Sixers because, Ben, I mean, I have an admission to make. I mean, will you give me the floor to admit that I was wrong?
Go for it, my friend.
Oh, I just thought you'd like to serve this up for me on a plate because you picked the Sixers to be NBA champions, and I laughed at you. I said, Ben, ha, 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 because they have no bench. Well, I am going to eat my words because I was dead wrong about their lack of depth. And it's crazy to me because they have all this money invested into their starting lineup. We know about the Simmons and the Embiids and the Harrises and the Horfords and the Richardsons. But the bench production has been a clear result of 4 players on minimum contracts and another guy, Mike Scott, on a mid-level exception. I mean, you got Furkan Korkmaz, James Ennis, Kyle O'Quinn. I mean, these guys have been nothing short of brilliant for Brett Brown in the early going. And the Sixers, while we said last week we're going to win a lot of games ugly, and they have so far, they have been really good to start the year. And I just want to tell you, Ben, that on November 5th, 2019, this was the first major thing I was wrong about when we did our NBA prediction. So hats off to you. The Sixers have been great. I mean, I think this would have had a bit more clout had the Sixers been undefeated still coming into our recording this podcast, but they lost to the Suns. They're 5-1, and these bench guys are getting it done, man. Raul Neto, Coronaz, O'Quinn, Scott, Ennis. I'm sorry, fellas.
Yeah, I mean, Korkmaz hit the a kind of a dagger, and then the Suns just wouldn't go away. And I think that this is a team that really, really, really just has a lot of heart. Um, Korkmaz hit the game winner against Portland. I mean, some of these other guys, they're just solid veterans. I think what's still going to be their problem is shooting. They just, man, they are a tough team to watch at points on offense. But the one thing that I think when you look at this team is that Horford addition was absolutely huge for them. He is exactly the type of player they need on this team. He's very calm, cool, collected guy, and he can really play either of the front court spots, which is just massive for this team because it lets them give Embiid rest. And when those two are on the floor together, there's no room. There's absolutely no room on the floor. So we'll have to see if the shooting comes around, but they're tough. And I mean, I think when you look around the East, Jason, obviously the Bucks are hanging there, but the Sixers, I think their other biggest competition right now might be the Miami Heat, who are also off to a 5-1 impressive start. And when you look at this Eastern Conference, obviously we have a couple other teams, our favorite teams that we need to talk about, but you see this Heat team that's gone 5-1, Jason. Do you feel like they could be the other team in the East and maybe even a team that could challenge someone like the Sixers?
So I'm going to steal the last name of a rookie that has been really playing so well. And I'm going to say, how many Heat believers were there before the season starts? And the answer is Kendrick Nunn.
Ba-dum-bum.
But this team is making some believers out of pundits and hosts all over the country. Unfortunately, Ben, I am not one of them. I mean, you've seen Jimmy Butler-led teams before get out to really good starts, and then he can't stay healthy over the course of the year, or you're going to have some turmoil from within. I will say this, though. They have a couple of really nice young players in Tyler Hero and Kendrick Nunn.
Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, Bam Adebayo. No, I would never Adebayo a sandwich because I was wrong about the Heat, too. No, seriously, the Heat are good. They're definitely catching the attention of talk show hosts everywhere. But am I ready to drink the Kool-Aid? No, I'll have a sip. But I'm not ready to go there with them yet. I don't trust in Jimmy Butler enough, just based on his track record. Look, you know a lot more about Butler than I do, having seen him on the Bulls, the one year that the Timberwolves made the playoffs, and then obviously last year. He played really well for Philly in the playoffs, but he wanted to be the alpha. He got it, and Heat are off to a really good start. But I don't know, as of where we stand today, how sustainable this actually is.
Well, one of the things that's going to be really interesting is I think this team is going to be a legitimately very good defensive team. And Spoelstra likes to play with lineups. And I'm really interested to see how he shuffles things around. Because I think there's some really interesting combinations here. Because if you imagine the lineups with Dragic, Winslow, Nunn, Butler, Adebayo, there's a little bit of a shooting problem there because Winslow still is just not a great shooter, but he's one of these guys who can play the one on offense, but defend a 3 or a 4 on defense. And we're seeing a few of those guys in the league. I think LeBron was sort of the first one, the archetype of this. And he sort of had that Magic Johnson thing, but Magic Johnson was really a point guard, where LeBron James basically played point guard for his teams, but was guarding other teams' 3s and 4s. And I think sometimes folks kind of forget about how valuable that is for a team because you get a lot more versatility with your ability to play different lineups. And for the Heat, I think that is going to be a huge factor because he allows them to play Butler at the 3, at the